All right, so if we can take a hard left turn here, we're in the series called Greatest Hits where Jeff, Josh, and myself are bringing what we consider to be our great message. Now, my background is largely youth ministry, which means I have set things on fire. I have broken computers to prove a point. I've ripped pages out of the Bible, but what stands in front of you is a very mature 33-year-old, so we're not doing those things. But we are going to dive in to what I consider to be one of the coolest things I've ever found in Scripture, and it's something that honestly defines my life with God even today. It defines so much of who I am, but I thought it'd be great if we can just connect around the fact that there are things that are just broken inside of us. Can we do that? As a matter of fact, let's do a little group therapy session here. Let's have some fun. We're going to open up with some unusual phobias that are 100% real and 100% change the way that people act, all right? So let's put this up, right? The first one is anuntophobia. I did research these spellings. This is the fear of staying single. You know, forever. Right? It's the fear of staying single. What about this one? This is blenophobia. All right? Blenophobia, which is a fear of slime. It's real. There's a fear of slime, which if you grew up in the 90s like me, this does not make sense because we all wanted slime all the time thanks to Nickelodeon, right? So it's the fear of slime, the texture, the smell, the thing. If any of you have right now, you're about to run out the door. I just know it. But blenophobia is a fear of slime. What about this one? This one's fun to say. Helnologophobia, which I kid you not, is the fear of complex scientific terms. I feel like we could have done better with that one for those people. You want to talk about a moment not filled with grace, it's naming the complex fear of scientific facts, helnologophobia. All right, here's another one. Sengenzophobia, which is the fear of relatives. This one tends to flare up around the holidays. So if you're in school and you need to get out and you have people coming over, or if you're in work and you need a note, sengenzophobia. Nobody knows what it is. It's real. It'll get you out of the office, all right? What about this? This is turophobia, which is the fear of cheese, otherwise not moving to Wisconsin. And the last one is nomophobia, which is the fear of being without mobile phone coverage. This one particularly strikes the middle school girl population. For help, you can dial 1-800-NO. But like, these are real things that people are actually very, very afraid of. But as unusual as those are, I think there is one fear that we've all experienced, and it's the fear of not fitting in. It is the fear of not fitting in. It's the fear of wondering, am I good enough? It's the fear of wondering, do I have my life put together enough? It's the fear of wondering, should I be further ahead than where I'm at? It's that thing that pops up when your friends announce their third pregnancy and you're like, I don't have one yet. Am I behind? I'm not married yet. See, this is real. This fear of not fitting in, this fear of not keeping up. It's also known as adolescence. But it's a common experience. And that's why we look around to gauge how we're doing. And guys, I'm no different, right? I make different jokes around different people. I choose different restaurants depending on who I'm with, right? There's a different version of me in all these different phases and all these different areas of life. I'm willing to bet there is for you guys too. There's a slightly different version, right? But the incredible thing that we're going to see is that Jesus never changed who he was, which means there's something there that we need to learn from, right? I mean, just for example, in September of 2017, the Stephen King movie, It got re-released much to the delight of horror movie film lovers everywhere, of which I am not one, right? I was a grown man at that point. I'd been married for many years. I had a 3-year-old daughter, successful career, right? I knew who I was. But there was 2 guys that I worked with, and they looked at each other one Thursday afternoon, and they're like, hey, let's go see It. And instantly I'm like, all right, let's go. Game on. I love horror movies, right? Guys, we got to that theater, and I stared directly at the seat in front of me for 2.5 hours. Like the whole thing, like my view was 3 feet and down. And then I took probably about, 3 bathroom breaks, got 2 refills of popcorn. One time I spilled my Coke on purpose so I could go get a refill of it, right? I was terrified. But in that moment, all it took was them saying, what if we did this thing? And I'm like, well, I want to fit in. I want to be this version of me, so let's go, right? I was willing to compromise to fit in. But the risk is, the more we compromise to fit in, the less we really know who we are. The less we really know who Jesus called us to be. As a matter of fact, I would put it this way, right? Every time that we conform to others, we lose a bit of who we were created to be. Every time we give a little bit of ourselves so that we can fit in with the people around us, we lose that bit of us, and there's a chance we'll never get it back. There's a chance when we compromise, there's a chance when we give in, there's a chance when we hand that thing over that we're not ever going to be able to pick it back up. Now, in case you're wondering, I did pick up my distaste for horror movies. I picked that right back up. Right at the credits, I was done. But this is very true. You give away too much of yourself and you'll never be able to get yourself back together again. But Jesus, again, had this crazy unique way of being 100% him at all times. And crazy stuff happened around him, right? He was the guy that taught to thousands and talked to one. He was the guy that did miracles and raised somebody from the dead and healed blindness and muteness and illness and fed 5,000. He did all these miracles, right? And at the same time, then he turned around and was still strong enough to say, not right now, not for you yet. Right? Jesus did not give in. He did not sacrifice bits and pieces of who he was. He lived on mission. And he came forward to do the very thing that he was created to do. And he came forward to do the one thing that he could only possibly do. Now, what I want to do today is I want to look at a couple examples of Jesus doing that, because if we're in on this Jesus lifestyle, if we believe that he is worth emulating, then we've got to figure out how to stop giving up pieces of ourselves. And we have to figure out how to begin to live with his fullness in us in every possible situation, right? So we're going to look at the Gospel of John, which John actually says in there that everything you need to know about Jesus is in my book because I was his favorite disciple. Now, whether that's true or not, we can look at John and realize that he has a lot of amazing things to offer. So we're going to pick up our story as Jesus is about to leave Judea and head to Galilee, all right? And we're just going to look at verse by verse on this thing, right? So number one, John 4, verse 4 says, he had to go through Samaria, full stop. All right, like we have to go through Chicago sometimes, right? But like the original listeners of this would have heard this with such context behind it that I don't want us to miss it, right? You might as well read this in the original language, in the original context with this type of voice structure, right? He had to go through Samaria. It wasn't something he wanted to do. It wasn't something he was looking forward to doing. It was something that he literally had to do. Something was drawing him, the Spirit was drawing him that he had to do this, right? I mean, guys, this is how we talk about shopping trips. All right, we don't come along where we say like, we got to go to Yankee Candle. We don't say, I'm so excited that I got to go shopping for 4 hours. No, like we say like that had is in our vocabulary, man. It's like, I had to go to Target. And then for some reason we had to go to Home Goods. And then the whole thing switches. Then we got to get a steak. And let me tell you about what we did with that steak, right? But you might as well read that into this, that Jesus had to go to Samaria. It's not something he chose. It's something he was driven to. I mean, look at this map real quick. I'll walk you through this, right? So he was in Judea. He was going to Galilee. Samaria is right in the middle. Now, most of the Jewish people in that day would not take A to B. They would either go A to B to C to D to go over here. They would add days to their trips to avoid Samaria because there was this deep-seated racism and this deep-seated hatred between the Jewish people and the Samaritans of their time. So they would either go all the way around Samaria entirely, right here. They would go around there like that. Sometimes they would come up to the Mediterranean and go around, but they really like to go around that right-hand side and up and over so they could avoid this region entirely. And compromising for Jesus would have been this pathway. Him taking the easy way out would have been avoiding this region entirely. It would have meant keeping his head down. It would have meant lower risk. It would have meant, just staying in control. But there's something in Jesus' character. There's something in Jesus' spirit that said he had to end up right here at Sychar. So we pick it up. Right? In the middle of Sychar, Jesus and his followers get there. They get into town, and the first thing they do is they start to look for food and drink, right? And things don't change sometimes. First thing we do when we get into town is we look for food and drink. So Jesus goes to the well that is in the middle of the town of Sychar. Now, that well was where all of the women would draw water, usually about twice a day in the morning and in the evening to get them through the day. Now, they did that for a lot of reasons. One, you can imagine it was probably just to survive the heat, right? Again, I've said this time and time again this summer. I hate summer. I'll avoid the heat, so I get it, right? So they would go there early morning and late at night so they could avoid the heat. But there's also a social context at play, right? Where they wanted to go and be with their friends because humans are circle-based creatures. So even if they didn't necessarily want to get the water, they would know their friends were going to be there, so they would go so they could do it with their friends. Right? So Jesus, in the middle of the day, arrives at Sychar and goes straight to that watering well so that he could get water, but what catches him is a bit of a surprise. John 4, 8 through 10 says this. It says, the woman who was at the well came up and talked to him, was surprised, for Jews refused to have anything to do with Samaritans. She said to Jesus after he talked to her that you are a Jew and I am a Samaritan woman. Why are you asking me for a drink? This is just calling out the obvious, right? So Jesus replied, if you only knew the gift God has for you and who you are speaking to, you would ask me and I would give you living water. Now, if you've been around for a while, Jesus talked all the time in metaphors and stories that were confusing to the people around him and confusing to the people of his time, right? Even his disciples at other points would come up and be like, that was a great point, Jesus. What did it mean? Right? What are you talking about, right? And this woman who was literally just coming out in the middle of the day to get her water must have been feeling very similar, like, okay, that's nice. Can I just get you the water and leave? Like, I don't know what you're talking about, living water. I just wanted to get here and be by myself, right? So Jesus talks in metaphors a lot. But again, our big point today is that Jesus didn't compromise. And that Jesus always brought 100%, pick this up because it's going to be the rest of our thread. Jesus brought 100% truth to every situation, but he also brought 100% grace. So it keeps going. All right, so Jesus replied to this. He said, anyone who drinks this water will soon become thirsty again, probably pointing to the fountain, right? But those who drink the water I give will never be thirsty again, for it becomes a fresh, bubbling spring within them, giving them eternal life. Please, sir. The woman said, give me this water, then I'll never be thirsty again. You see the moment where the whole thing changes. This crazy metaphor has something inside of it. This analogy that Jesus is drawing has something inside of it that makes this woman instantly almost jump out of her skin to be like, yes, that. I'm in on that. What are you talking about? Right? There's something in this promise that immediately captures the woman's attention. And God's truth is often an incredible promise to us, right? Jesus bringing 100% truth in that moment was him walking forward and saying, the truth of this matter is that this water is secondary to what I can offer you. This life is secondary to what I can offer you. There is something greater for you to have. There's something greater for you to be living in, right? God's truth is an incredible promise that can give us something that can sustain us through life. It's something we can hold on to during the storms. We can grasp it. During the struggles, we can hold on to it. During the questions, we can answer it, right? God's truth gives us all of those things at one time, but the truth isn't always easy. The truth doesn't allow compromise. The truth doesn't give up pieces of itself so that it can fit in with the rest of the world. See, Jesus being 100% truth meant that he was 100% truth all the time. It meant that he brought 100% truth to everything that was going on around them. That's so different from what we do today. But remember, 100% truth is often hard. Right, so we keep kind of going with this conversation, right? So after getting this woman's attention, Jesus leans in. And you can just see this conversation unfolding on a fountain. He's been talking about water and living water and eternal springs, and she started creeped out and weirded out, and then she started leaning forward like, wait, that makes sense. So when Jesus leans forward, and look at this, it's incredible. He says, go and get your husband. I don't have a husband, the woman replied. And Jesus said, you're right. You don't have a husband, for you've had 5 husbands. And you aren't even married to the man you're living with right now. You certainly spoke the truth. Well, that's uncomfortable. At this point, the lady's probably like, I'll get you more water, man. Can we just go back to that exciting part, right? Can we leave my exes out of this thing? Because I don't want to go there again, man. I got stories I could tell you. But Jesus, he got her with this exciting promise that is God's truth. But truth never compromises. See, Jesus could have left this conversation at the idea of like, you can have this water. You can live this way. It can offer up all of this goodness to you. Isn't that great? High five. I'll see you later. Right? And he could have left the woman with that, and she would have been like, her life would have been better. Right? Her life would have been better because she would have had this encounter with Jesus who had a following and people were excited to see him. And she could have left and been like, guys, I met Jesus and he said this and it's exciting and now I have this special water jug that I'll sell on eBay, right? It could have been this moment where she left and went, I feel better. But truth doesn't compromise. Truth refuses to leave things on the table that need to be said. So when Jesus leans forward and says the one thing that she never wanted to hear out loud, and he says it matter-of-factly, and he says it straightforward, that is the moment where 100% truth meets 100% grace. That is the moment where we see the fullness of God exhibited in Jesus' character. Because he says, that one thing that you want to leave hidden, I know, I see. I'm going to call it out because somebody has to. But he doesn't just leave the woman in shambles, right? He doesn't just leave the woman in shambles. This woman who came out during the middle of the day to avoid the social circles of the water well. She came out because she was trying to hide, because I guarantee you she'd been pushed to the edges of society. She'd been pushed away from her friends and her circles because she had been married 5 times and was living with a man that she was not married to at the time, right? Those were the things she was trying to hide. That was why she was out during the hottest part of the day, so that she could get water once and stay hidden the rest of the day. And here comes Jesus. When she least expected it, and he blows the whole thing apart. Truth meets grace. Because then he leans forward and he says 4 words. I am the Messiah. Now, context is king. This is something that Jesus largely kept hidden from most of the people that followed him. Most of the people that followed him did not get this I am the Messiah, right? Even the disciples, his closest friends, were still kind of uncertain about it at times. They're like, they say you're the Messiah. I just wanted to double check, right? So they even keep this hidden sometimes. Jesus did not say this. As a matter of fact, there's this whole concept throughout Mark that is called the messianic mystery, that he doesn't always lean forward and say that I am the Messiah. But yet to this woman, who, let's be honest, is not important in her social settings, who doesn't have a lot to offer the movement of Jesus, who is sitting there broken. This is one of the few people in the gospel that he leans forward to and says these 4 words, I am the Messiah. See, Jesus kept this hidden because at the time, people expected the Messiah to be some political conquering hero. Right? They expected this world beater political hero that would come in at the top and would set the Jews back in control. Right? They had been subservient to Jews and Babylonians and all these struggles in their political history, that they expected their Messiah to come and set them free and to put them back in charge. The reason Jesus didn't say, I'm the Messiah to everybody is because all that came impacted on top of that. I mean, basically, what the Jews were looking for at that time was not Jesus as a leader. They were looking for Thor and Wakanda at Avengers Infinity War. This is what I mean. If you've not seen this movie, this is when all hope seems lost, and then comes a tree, Thor, and a raccoon, and suddenly the whole thing changes. Right? Suddenly they have the strength to keep going and they're winning, right? What the Jews were wanting from Jesus back in that time, from their Messiah, without knowing it was Jesus, was they wanted Thor to show up and to change the battlefield. But see, Isaiah tells us that Jesus came, the Messiah comes to be a suffering servant, not to be a political conqueror, not to be somebody that takes the world at the top. See, the Christian movement was always designed to be helping everyone at the bottom. The Christian movement was always designed to be at the edges and work its way in, to help more and more people. The Jesus movement is not necessarily connected to power, it is connected to service. But it gets all of its power from grace and truth. I mean, our situation is no different, right? See, Jesus brings 100% truth to us all the time, but he follows it with 100% grace. I mean, if we were sitting at that fountain with Jesus right now, he might say something that we don't want to hear, right? He might say your short temper is pushing everyone out on the edges. The way you lose your anger is pushing everybody away from you, right? Your drinking's gotten out of control. It's affecting more people than just yourself. He might lean forward and say you're diving deeper into debt to try to show off to your neighbors that don't even like you. He might say your legalistic spirit, the way you're looking down on people that disagree with you, is hurting those around you. And it's becoming what you're known for. He might lean forward and say your judgment and your harsh tones are keeping your kids away. See, Jesus' truth, God's truth, doesn't leave anything on the table. It brings everything that needs to be said, and it says it loudly and clearly because we need to hear it. See, truth can be brutal. But the good news is that Jesus doesn't just leave us there, right? He doesn't just wreck us at the fountain and then just leave us cast on the side and broken. Because then he leans forward and he brings grace. He leans forward and he says, I am the Messiah. Not to be a conquering hero, but to be a suffering servant that is ready to work alongside you on this thing. 100% grace matched with 100% truth. Because the good news is, as much as Jesus is a full display of God's truth, he's also a full display of God's grace. They always work hand in hand with each other. They always work side by side. Jesus offers this woman an amazing promise that life with God can be better life with God can be better than life without God, that when you believe in God, he'll make your life better and he'll make you better at life, right? He offers this full truth, complete with the fact that she's broken. And then he follows with all the heart and all the grace and all the forgiveness in the world by trusting her with who he is. And he does the same thing to us, right? John actually puts it this way in an earlier recording of Jesus' life. In John 1:14, he says, for the word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. This is at the core of the whole Jesus project. This is at the core of the whole of who Jesus is, that the Word put on flesh, that God put on flesh. Other translations say that he made his living among us, that he moved into the neighborhood, right? And he was the one and only Son, came from the Father, full of grace and truth. And that is an incredible promise, that we can live with complete grace and complete truth. And we can experience the fact that we are broken, but know that right behind it is the fact that we are loved. And that does not change. And that's good. That's a good promise. That's good enough to leave on, right? But I can't leave you there, because remember, as Jesus' people, it's now our job to carry forward his mission. If Jesus was still here in flesh and he was just 100% grace and 100% truth and he was an Instagram influencer and a TikTok follower, right? If he did all of those things, we could say, great, I'm going to live in that promise and I'm just going to sit on it. But we are God's plan A now, and there is no plan B, which means the way that we interact with grace and truth matters, because that is how the world is going to see grace and truth. It's not through Jesus in a book. They're going to see it through us first. And you know this about yourself. You know this about yourself, that you have a leaning one way or the other. You know this about your parents. It's my very first car accident. Was back in 2006. This was look at this stud muffin of a car. I was driving a 2001 Chevy Cavalier. I know what you're thinking. Yes, my parents did let me have that speed demon. And we were driving around. It became our life mission one winter night to drift all the way around the cul-de-sac. 16-year-old boys are very intelligent. So we did it once and kind of chickened out halfway through. I'm like, no, let's go for it. So we did it again, different cul-de-sac. And suddenly this parked car just came out of nowhere. And we rammed into it, right? And in that moment, I had about 30 seconds to decide what to do. Luckily, my friend had the right decision and called the police, all right? But then I had a secondary decision that was going to define my life. I just knew it. Do I call my mom or do I call my dad? Right? And I called my mom instantly, because my mom is a pushover. Love you, hope you're not watching, but she is a pushover. And all I had to say was, Mom, I'm so scared. And the whole thing was done. Right? The whole thing was over. The fact was, I was forgiven at the moment. She paid to fix the car. I was driving the next day. Everything was fine. If I would have called my dad, well, I'd probably still be living in Matson, Illinois with my 2 kids and my wife up in my high school bedroom, because I would still be grounded to this day. But I knew where my parents fell on grace and truth, right? And I called the one that was always leaning towards grace. And I avoided the one that had the truth. Now again, back to where we're at today and back to who you are today. The people around you know which side you lean on. The people around you know what your first gear is, what your first pitch is. And they know when they come to you whether they're going to be met with grace or truth. And I would guess because they know that, it makes the decision of what they're going to trust you with every single time. Which means that makes the decision for how much of Jesus they're going to see through you every single time. How we balance this grace and truth thing is so important. We're going to move quickly right here through another story, right? Jesus, in another time in John, when Jesus came along to a group of religious leaders who were about ready to kill a woman caught in adultery, right? It's in John 8. And Jesus, what he does here is incredible because the religious leaders are right. In that context, they had every right to actually stone the woman. Is it fair? No. Is it right? No. Was it what they did then? Yes, it's history. We can't change it. So they actually had every context to punish the woman and let the man go free. And then Jesus came up and he challenged them and he kneeled down and he started scribbling something in the sand. Now, nobody knows what he started writing, but scholars agree that it was most likely the sins of the men that were about ready to throw the stones to kill that woman. Jesus wrote down in the sand the very truth that they were trying to hide and the truth that they were trying to avoid. And then he stood up and he said this in John 8:7. He said, "Let he who is without sin cast the first stone." See, here we see a moment where Jesus meets truth as an offensive weapon. And he says, listen, you're not as good as you think you are. These are the things you're trying to hide. Now go. You cannot live in this anymore. Let he who was without sin cast the first stone, and slowly but surely they dissipated, right? They went away. And then he turns to the woman who was caught in adultery, the woman who was broken, the woman who saw her life flashing before her eyes. And he turned to her and he said, where are your accusers? And didn't even one of them condemn you? No, Lord, she said. And Jesus said, neither do I. Now go and sin no more. Neither do I. Go and sin no more. The truth is, she had every right to be in trouble. The grace is, I don't condemn you. Now go and sin no more. I mean, this is what he's saying to all of us, right? I want you all to leave that life of sin. I want you to accept this truth that you're broken and this truth that I can be there for you, this grace that you can be saved. I want you to live free in that. I want you to move forward from that. And then he leans into us and he says, and if you can't right now, I love you. I want you to leave that life of pain and I want you to leave it all behind and run towards what I have for you. But if you can't right now, I love you. And if you try, and if you fail, and if you can't get there, I love you. And if you think you're too broken, and if you think you're beyond repair, I love you. And if you think you're not worth it, and if you think it's not real, I love you. See, when grace and truth meet, lives are changed. When grace and truth meet, family legacies are changed. When grace and truth meet, well, the world never looked the same again. That is the history we live in. Is that when grace and truth meet inside of us, it is our duty and our privilege to carry that forward to a world that needs to hear that. I want you to be set free, and if you can't, I still love you. I may want you to agree with me, and if you don't, I still love you. And I want you to see what I see in you, and if you can't, I still love you. We need to pull better from grace and truth and bring both of them into every situation. So this whole message was written in 2013, 2016, 2019. I've done this one a lot. But here's the fresh word. How you handle grace and truth over the next year will define the way people see Jesus more than it has in the last 10. How you handle grace and truth and how you handle your leaning and your preference over the next year will matter more than the work that has happened around you for the last 10. And is that fair on us? Maybe not, but is it the way the world is seeing us right now? Yes. And how we handle this moment will determine the next generation of Christianity. See, there's this truth in the matter that you're only ever 2 generations away from something dying completely. And the church has never died. The church has never faltered. As a matter of fact, Jesus said the gates of hell will not prosper against the church, right? The church is the offensive weapon against the enemy. So the church will never fail. But we are always 2 generations away from losing who we are. And I would say this climate that we are surrounded with right now and the way that we are handling ourselves changes that equation. We are 1 generation away from losing who we are. How you handle grace and truth over the next 12 months will matter more than almost anything else you've done over the last 10. John 14:6. Jesus said this. He said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you're sitting at home, if you're sitting in this room, and if this grace and truth explosion just happened inside of your soul, where you realize that maybe your life isn't what you wanted, and you just heard that there's a way to fix it. If you're sitting here and you're remembering the things that you wish you could forget, and Jesus calls you out on it inside of that fountain, and you just heard that there's a way out. The way out is right here. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. When grace and truth meet, when you accept the truth that you're broken, but you accept the grace that you're free. I'll say it again. When you accept the truth that you're broken and you accept the grace that you're free, your life changes. It all happens through the grace and the truth of Jesus. Would you pray with me? Lord, this moment, the volume is turned up to 12. The struggle is real. What we feel is real, and the way we respond is also real. And the way we respond to the world around us will determine how they see you. So Lord, I pray that you would fill us with the wisdom to see what is grace and what is truth. You would fill us with the courage to speak truth, but then fill us with the heart to stay through the hard part and to bring grace into the equation. Lord God, if we were touched in a new way with this idea today, if grace and truth just exploded in our soul, and if we now see the fact that our past is something we want to leave behind, Lord, I pray that we would just accept this free grace given forgiveness. Lord, that grace and truth would meet in our very nature today, and we would come running to you, the person who has set all of that right, the person who has saved us from the truth of our brokenness by giving us the incredible gift of grace. Lord, if we have met you in that moment today, I pray you would help us to live a life that follows you, Lord. I pray you to give us the courage to share it with somebody and the courage to find out what it looks like to live differently, what it looks like to live in grace and truth, and what it looks like to change the world around us because of it. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Guys, if you need prayer, there is a prayer team that's waiting right there. You can drop prayer in the chat online. We will see you next week at the park.